An 8-year-old daughter realized that her stepmother was the one who killed her father, and she had been trained to manipulate and lie from the time she met her stepmother. Sarah would go on to say that she never got to explain the lies that she told social workers following her father's killing, or why they told those lies in the first place. For years, Sarah and her brother had no voice, both before and after their father was killed. But at 18 years old, she decided to tell her side of the story. Sarah wrote her book, A Time for Truth, My Father Jason and My Search for Justice and Healing. And for the dedication, she wrote, for those who have been denied the chance to share their story. You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke Makenna, and this case, it contains a brutal murder, alleged cover-up involving children, survivor stories, and a case of injustice in the criminal justice system. These children did not get to speak up in court against their stepmother and their stepmother's father, so they have decided to write it in this book that they have recently come out with. I will link it down below. It is emotional, it is really thorough, and it tells a lot about the history of what went on inside that home, and that it's not as simple as two kids who were just told to say something, even though that is exactly what happened. There were layers upon layers, years of this training that occurred deep within their psyche that led to them feeling like this was the only route to take and that their father was the villain. Before we dive in, a quick word from our sponsor, EarthBreeze. EarthBreeze is a sustainable laundry detergent that is in a single sheet rather than a giant jug. One sheet equals a whole load of clean laundry, and not only do they come with a fragrance version, but they also have a fragrance free, which is hypoallergenic and dermatologist tested. Did you know that skin issues can be from laundry detergent? My parents realized this when I was younger and I was struggling with my skin issues, so I've always been super cautious, and with EarthBreeze I have not had to worry about that at all. There's no harsh chemicals and no unnecessary additives, and it doesn't bother my skin. Plus, you can get so many loads of clean laundry with this slim packaging of sheets. So right now you can actually get 40% off with your auto shipment at earthbreeze.com/Brooke. Now let's get back to the story. So it was 2015 in North Carolina, and 8-year-old Sarah Corbett lived with her 10-year-old brother Jack, her 39-year-old father Jason, and her 37-year-old stepmother Molly. The siblings' biological mother, Jason's first wife, Mags Fitzpatrick, had actually died of an asthma attack in 2006. This was when Sarah was just 12 weeks old and Jack was 2, so they did not get to know who their mother was. However, their dad always let them know that they were born into love and that he adored their mother. Every anniversary of her death, they released balloons and watched old videos. So Jason was a single father for quite some time. He was a business manager at the Multi-Packaging Solutions, raising his kids in Ireland at this time. 2 years later, Jason would meet a girl named Molly. She was actually nannying for him for the children who were 1 year old and 3 years old at this time. So she became the full-time live-in nanny, and 3 years later in 2011, Molly and Jason would get married after really evolving their relationship into a full-blown romantic relationship. So Sarah was 4 and Jack was 6, and they would move from Ireland to America, where Molly had come from. She was an American who had moved to Ireland for that nanny job specifically, but she was getting very homesick. Jason was able to switch jobs to the North Carolina department at his company, and so this all worked out well. They found a beautiful community to live in called the Meadowlands, and Jason worked about 30 minutes away from his job, which was around Lexington in North Carolina. So the family of 4 moved to 160 Panther Creek Court in Lexington, North Carolina, but on August 2nd of 2015, Jason Corbett was found deceased inside of this home. A 911 call had came from the home, and investigators would find him beaten to death. But what his daughter, who was 8 years old at the time, remembered from that night was suddenly being woken up by boots on the ground inside of her home. She saw a shadowy figure next to her bed, and she saw this towering, bald stranger. She thought it was her grandpa, who had maybe cut his hair somehow, and then she saw the police badge. So she was lifted from her bed around 3 in the morning morning by a police officer. She was told that she could either walk downstairs with her eyes closed by the police officer or she could be carried. And so after a while, she told the officer that she was actually feeling kind of dizzy. And so he picked her up, covered her eyes, and she listened to the static of their walkie-talkies. She also saw her brother being carried behind her. They were taken downstairs to the basement. So they were on the second floor. They were taken to the first floor and then to the basement where their stepmother's parents were staying. It was kind of a guest bedroom area. So Sarah and Jack were left with their stepmother's mother, and they had no idea that something bad had happened. It would be hours later that they found out their father was dead. Now, Corporal Clayton Dagenhart was the officer who was first arrived at the scene. He had taken photos of the crime scene from his mobile phone, finding the naked, blood-stained body on the bedroom floor. There was blood seen on the walls, floors, hallway, and he hadn't expected to see much blood. So when he went up to get the kids, he held Sarah's face against his shirt, covering her eyes as they went downstairs to make sure that these kids did not see anything that had happened. Now, the rest of the officers in the home actually went silent as Sarah and Jack were carried through the crime scene, unable to see what was going on as they were taken downstairs to their grandmother. The basement was the room where their grandparents were staying, and this was Molly's parents, who were Thomas and Sharon Martens, who would often come and stay in that guest bedroom. So Sarah would see Sharon, the grandmother, sitting in her bed reading a book with all the dogs around her. She seemed very calm. Jack was asking where his father was to the officers, but they did not respond. All they said was to wait there. Now, Jason's injuries were found to be similar to those after falls from great heights or car crashes. Medical examiner Dr. Craig Nelson said that blunt force trauma was the cause of death, and there were 10 different areas of impact to the head. He was unable to tell which blow would have rendered him incapacitated or which blows the sequence occurred in. The murder weapon was believed to be a bloody bat and brick paver, which was found at the scene. Now, a Sergeant Alpine said that he arrived at the scene believing that this was a man in cardiac arrest. So he placed his hands under Jason's head, and that is when his hand actually slid into his skull. Now, Davidson County Police in North Carolina had strange audio from the 911 call that night. This had been made by Molly's father. So the stepmother's father, Thomas Martens. He stated that his daughter's husband had gotten into a fight with his daughter and he intervened, and now the husband was in bad shape, that he needed help. When the 911 operator asked if he was hurt, Thomas stated that he was bleeding all over and he may have killed him. During this 15-minute phone call, Thomas was said to be calm throughout, and Molly could be heard hysterical at times.
What's going on there?
My daughter's husband, my son-in-law, got in a fight with my daughter. I intervened, and I think he's in bad shape. We need help.
Okay, what do you mean he's in bad shape? He's hurt?
He's bleeding all over, and I may have killed him. You know?
All right. Was he drinking?
Yes, he had been drinking during the course of the day.
Is he conscious at all?
No.
Is he breathing?
I can't tell.
All right. What I need for you to do is I need someone to roll him onto his back, flat on his back.
He's a big, heavy man. I can't do it.
All right. Is there anyone there that can help you?
My daughter, and she's in terrible shape.
Okay. Someone needs to get him on his back. We need to verify his breathing.
I've got him rolled over.
All right. What happened? Did you hit him in the head or?
I hit him in the head.
With what?
With a baseball bat. He was choking my daughter. He said, "I'm going to kill her."
All right. I need you to make sure that his mouth and nose are clear.
It's a mess.
I know. You need to clear it.
As clear as I can get it. He's covered in blood. I'm handing the phone to my daughter.
Hey, are you with me?
Yes.
All right, listen to me. I need you to calm down so that we can help him, okay? All right, your dad's going to need some help pumping.
I'm certified. I just can't think.
Okay.
Now, Thomas would later describe the altercation as a Donnybrook or a public argument or uncontrollable fight. However, the search warrants that Detective B.M. Smith wrote said that the struggle described by Thomas was not consistent with the evidence in this case, particularly in the master bedroom. Deputy David Dillard was the one who had taken Molly Martens, the stepmother, from the scene to the patrol vehicle. And he would say that he noticed she was wearing pajamas. She appeared not to have any injuries on her, but he heard her making crying noises, not ever seeing any tears. He noted that she was aggressively rubbing her neck in a scrubbing motion and had to be told to stop. The search warrant also revealed that Jason was planning to go back to Ireland on August 21st, 2015, 19 days later, with his children to live there permanently. He had even sought to transfer financial assets, including $60,000 from North Carolina, back to Ireland. Now, at this time, social workers were brought in to speak with the children, Sarah and Jack, about anything they saw or remembered. This occurred at the Dragonfly House, which is a child advocacy center. This was while the kids were staying with Molly and her brother. Now, these children told investigators of the abuse that Molly endured by their father. They called Molly Mom, and so Jack was asked what their dad would do when he was mad, and he responded by saying he would physically and verbally hurt my mom. He said he saw punching, hitting, and pushing. Another interview of the children a few days later revealed that Jason would get angry over simple things where he would allegedly hurt Molly. Sarah said sometimes she had nightmares and that she would come to Molly for comfort, but that Jason would get very angry if she accidentally woke him up. They then spoke of one of the murder weapons, the brick paver, saying that they had planned to paint it, but it was raining outside, so they brought it inside and put it on Molly's desk, which is why it was inside the home. Now, after Jason's death, Molly, the stepmother, filed for guardianship of Sarah and Jack. She believed that Jason's family were a cause of concern for their safety. In fact, his family was not allowed at the funeral, and off-duty police officers were hired to protect the kids. Now, Jason's sister, Tracy, and her husband opposed the guardianship being given to Molly Martens, saying that they would love to adopt these children. And shortly after this, Molly and her father, Thomas Martens, were arrested for murder. This was for second-degree murder and voluntary manslaughter of Jason Corbett. Thomas was found to be a former FBI agent of 30 years. Molly had no criminal record, but now they were arrested for murder, and Thomas said that he heard a disturbance that night while staying in their home. He entered their bedroom and he saw Jason choking his daughter, so he beat him to death. In December of 2015, they were indicted by a grand jury. Sarah and Jack were taken back to Ireland with Jason's sister, Tracy, and her husband, David, who became their legal guardians after it was found that this was actually in Jason's will. So they were living with their aunt and their uncle, and this would provide them a very stable environment as well as psychological support that they needed. Now, Tracy and David had been foster parents, and they knew that traumatized kids would often hide their trauma with a smile. So thankfully, they put them in therapy right away, and Sarah then began to open up. She would talk about the fact that some of the memories took years for her to disclose to this therapist, but that she would start to remember more and more things. Jack would actually end up telling Tracy and David in 2015 that he had lied to the social workers about his father's abuse. So their new guardians, with Jack's permission, went to the authorities saying this. Sarah would admit that she too lied about what she had said. She said the guilt of lying to the social workers about her father was almost unbearable. She wanted to explain to her dad that she was sorry that she lied, and she needed a sign that he knew she was sorry. Sarah and Jack would later talk to the police and confirm that they were recanting their statements and that they had not told the truth after their father had died. And we'll get into how that occurred and what led them to the lies in a moment. But prior to their June 2017 trial, Molly and Thomas Martens gave an interview to 2020 stating that they wanted to share the truth. Molly said she was from Tennessee and she planned on becoming a doctor, but she was struggling with mental health. She signed up for this nanny agency, and she said that Jason quickly reached out to her saying he needed help. So at 24 years old, she took the job, she moved to Ireland, and Molly said that the relationship between her and Jason grew quickly. She said she was in love with Jason and the kids, and so after years, they moved to America closer to her family. However, Molly said that Jason refused to let her adopt the children, that he was controlling, possessive, and paranoid. She said that Jason was different in public than he was alone, that the abuse was usually verbal over physical, but it became more violent, and she didn't want to leave the children as she had no rights to them to take them away. She said she was a victim of domestic violence. She was often choked by Jason and wondered if that was the real cause of death of his previous wife. Thomas Martens claimed that he had spoke to Jason's previous wife's father, and Thomas alleged that this father told him that he believed Jason had killed his daughter. Now, this family, the Fitzpatricks, denied this claim later on. But Thomas began to claim that he and his wife Sharon did not plan to go over to see their daughter Molly that night of the murder, but their plans fell through, so they went to visit her and the kids. He said they also brought along a baseball bat as a surprise gift for Jack. Molly would say that she had woken up that night around 3 a.m. because Sarah had had a nightmare and was outside of their room. So Molly went and put her back into bed, and she was returning to the bedroom when Jason woke up and asked her where she had gone. She said that Jason was furious and that Sarah was too old to be coddled. She said that Sarah was just 8 and had a nightmare. She said she had a bit more courage since her parents were there to stand up to Jason. And Molly said that he then covered her mouth and started choking her, but she was able to scream, and her dad must have heard and came upstairs with this baseball bat that he had brought for Jack. The Martens then went to trial for murder, and prosecutors claimed that Molly and her father beat Jason with a baseball bat and a paving brick because Molly believed that Jason was going to take the children from her. They also had the motive of $600,000 in a life insurance policy where the beneficiary was Molly. Investigators said also found that large amounts of money had been removed from Jason's bank accounts, which he shared with Molly after his death. However, the defense claimed that he was killed in an act of self-defense against an abusive spouse. The footage of the children's statements to social workers were actually not allowed as evidence. Photographs of Molly and Thomas from the night of the killing showed no visible markings on their bodies. Their clothes were not torn or damaged, and neither was Thomas's glasses. Jason was cold to the touch by the time that paramedics arrived, and neither Thomas nor Molly seemed winded, despite allegedly performing CPR for several minutes before they arrived. Police also had to warn Molly several times to stop vigorously scrubbing at her neck. Jason was said to be in such bad condition that part of his skull had actually fallen out on the gurney. A blood spatter expert claimed that they believed that the first blow happened while Jason was lying in bed. Jason's toxicology report showed that his blood alcohol level was 0.02% and he had the drug trazodone in his system. While this is an antidepressant drug, it isn't often prescribed for that as it isn't very effective. It is, however, used to induce sleep. The court had heard that Molly had requested a sleep aid from her doctor shortly before the killing and was prescribed trazodone on July 30th of 2015, filling her prescription and picking it up that day, 2 days prior to his death. Jason actually gone to the doctor prior to his death, saying he felt dizzy and stressed and angry lately for no reason. Now, Molly's statement from the night of the killing was revealed to be about the fight that led to Jason choking her, her father coming into the room, Jason trying to hit her father, and then her not remembering after that. Thomas would testify at the trial that the night they arrived at Molly's house, Molly and Jason's house, it was pleasant, it was social. He was asked if he hated Jason, and he said that he was critical of Jason's behavior and he just didn't like him. He testified that seeing his daughter being choked by Jason was frozen in his mind, and he told Jason to let her go, and Jason said, "I'm going to kill her." He said he hit Jason until he thought that he could not kill him. Now, Molly didn't testify, but the court did hear about the life insurance policy on Jason, where Molly was the beneficiary, and a former co-worker in the FBI testified against Thomas and stated that they worked together for 10 years, and he had told her on multiple occasions that he hated his son-in-law. In fact, 2 months before the death, he was saying this. The co-worker said this was common knowledge, and he had even complained back in 2011 when they had first gotten married. But Jason's son Jack's victim impact statement was read to the court. And this said, Molly Martens will not be forgotten. She will always be remembered as the woman who killed her husband for no reason. She will always be remembered as a murderer. The prosecution called the defense's story empty, barren, and cold and said, Jason can't speak to you jurors, but his blood speaks the truth and screams for justice. The defense then asked the jurors, what level of fear would Molly and Tom have? Close your eyes in your mind and think, what fear did Tom and Molly feel? The minute you find reasonable doubt in this case, your work is done. Now, in August of 2017, Molly and Thomas Martens were found guilty and sentenced to 20 to 25 years. Molly told the court, I did not murder my husband. My father did not murder my husband. The incidents of August 2nd happened as they happened on a somewhat regular basis. The only difference is my father was there. The jury foreman then stated that Molly's clothing that she was wearing the night of the killing was a different story than she was giving. That she had blood spatter and tissue to the point of overkill, and she would have had to be too close during the blows for that to happen. Now, the next year, Jason's sister Tracy went on the Late Late Show to share what she believed happened. She claimed that Molly had planned to kill her brother. However, this is not where the story ends, nor was it justice given. After Molly and Tom Martens were convicted of second-degree murder in 2017 and sentenced to 20 to 25 years, they had appealed, stating alleged jury misconduct. This was denied, but they tried again, and in 2020, the North Carolina Court of Appeals agreed that they were entitled to a new trial. They stated they found errors with evidence, and they ruled that statements that the children had provided to the social workers were ruled inadmissible when they should have been admissible. There was also not enough evidence to support that the Martens were the aggressors during the incident. Now, the prosecution appealed this to the Supreme Court, but it was being upheld. So a retrial was announced, and the Martens were released after serving 3 years. They were ordered to surrender their passports, banned from having contact with Jack and Sarah, but they were let go on a $200,000 bond. Then at a pretrial hearing in March of 2022, Sarah and Jack insisted that they attend. They did not attend the trial. They were too young. It was too raw at that point. But Sarah would explain that she was terrified to see Molly. And when she did at that courthouse, Molly was laughing with her friends. Sarah immediately began to cry, but she was determined to go into that courtroom that day. They would find that instead of the new trial that had been set for October 2023, plea deals were given. Prosecutors felt that the chances of getting a successful murder conviction at a retrial were small, so instead they offered the accused a plea deal. Thomas Martens would plead guilty to voluntary manslaughter, and Molly would plead no contest to voluntary manslaughter. They wouldn't be having a trial, only a sentencing hearing. The defense claimed that Jason's killing was self-defense, but the prosecution said that the multiple blows to his head after he was unconscious was excessive. Sarah, who was now 16 years old, was angry at this plea deal, saying there was nothing voluntary about her dad's death, that he did not choose to leave her or her brother. She said it felt like they were getting away with murder. She wanted to attend the sentencing hearing, but she was going to step outside during the crime scene expert's testimony, saying that she remembered her dad smiling and she wanted to keep it like that. She didn't need those memories replaced by the images at the crime scene. She was also going to read a victim impact statement since she was not going to be allowed to testify. Not only was she silenced in that way, they were also under a gag order until the hearing was finished, meaning they could not talk to the media. Sarah would speak in her book about on the ride to the courthouse for the hearing. Tracy and herself would blast music as that helped Sarah feel stronger. They were listening to Strong Enough by Cher, which was their go-to anthem for girl power. Sarah felt like they were preparing to go into battle as soldiers. Sarah's now second dad, David, sat in front of her, promising to protect her from the Martens in that courtroom. Sarah knew that she had to rein in any emotion or anger because she felt like any action of hers could be used to imply she was a reflection of her father and would make her father look bad. That's what the 16-year-old girl had to think about, because the prosecution was going to be painting her father, Jason, as an aggressor and an abuser. And Sarah said that he was the victim, not the perpetrator. At this hearing, the court would be playing the interviews of Sarah and Jack talking to the social workers. They were heard saying that their dad was abusive to Molly and that Molly told them multiple times that their dad wasn't the best father. There was also footage from an interview of Molly's mother, Sharon, who said that Molly and Jason had a horrible relationship and that children told her about abuse, although she did admit she had never seen it. There was also a recording played where Molly was recording a few months before the death. Her, Jason, and the kids were in the kitchen. The couple was having an argument while the kids tried to stop it. Now to this, the state spoke about the fact that both children had recanted their statements of abuse. Jack had recanted a year after the killing, stating, "I told them what Molly wanted me to tell them. Dad was not abusive." 6 years after the killing, Sarah told investigators, "I never saw my father hurt or hit my mother. There was always a lot of arguing and yelling from both of them." They both stated that they were coached by Molly to lie about domestic abuse and that Molly was really the abusive one. There was also an interrogation of Thomas Martens from that day that was shown where he stated, "I hit him. I hit him with a baseball bat. I was scared to death he was going to kill her." A picture of Jason's hand from the crime scene was then shown with blonde hairs in it. The two alleged murder weapons were also shown, the baseball bat and the brick paver, and they were brought into the courtroom. But the defense then said that Thomas was actually accepting responsibility, that his actions were excessive. But the question was, why were they excessive? The defense said that Thomas was so distraught at seeing Jason assault Molly that it basically impaired his perception and cognition. Molly's defense counsel stated that Molly confided in multiple witnesses that Jason killed his first wife and she feared she would be next, even stating that Jason's first wife, Margaret Fitzpatrick, didn't die of his asthma attack, but it was homicide by manual strangulation. The defense did say there were questions on whether his first wife's passing was from natural causes or if it was from Jason having something to do with it. But the Fitzgerald family, the ex-wife's family, were outraged at this claim. They said that Margaret, or Mags, had suffered with asthma for as long as they could remember, and that her sister was actually present the night of her death and saw her having a horrible asthma attack. Her sister was even willing to testify about this, but it was never requested because it did not fit the defense narrative. Molly Martens then addressed the judge, saying that she was fully aware of what had happened that night. She did the best that she could as a wife, a mother, and a human, and not an hour goes by that she doesn't feel the weight of her actions and that she wished it never happened. Thomas Martens also addressed the judge, saying that after reviewing the evidence himself, he believes that his actions were excessive. He said that he opened the bedroom door that night to hell and that he had to save the only daughter that he had. He had no choice. For the first time, Thomas's wife Sharon would speak to the court. She had refused to testify in the original trial, but Sharon had given a statement to the police the night of the killing, stating that they arrived at 8 p.m. that night, driving 5 hours from their home. Sharon stated that Molly had told them that she fought with Jason a lot, but she never said that it was violent. But Sharon had said that Sarah and Jack told her that the abuse was violent. After the kids told her this, Sharon said she hid a phone inside their home and gave them her number to call in case of an emergency. They even had secret code words. But Sharon said that the morning of August 2nd, she woke up with Tom, who had gotten up and said he was going to go tell them to calm down or he was going to call the police. She said that the screaming stopped a few minutes later and she fell back asleep and didn't wake up again until the police entered her room. Now, Molly's original police statement hours after the murder was shown for the first time, the actual footage of her interrogation. When asked if she realized her husband did not survive his injuries, she said, "I didn't think so," with zero emotion. But when asked about breaking the news of his death to his family in Ireland, she began to sob, saying, "What if I'm scared of his family because they will try to kill me because he is not alive? I'm scared they will take the kids. They are his children. They are not citizens." When told that was a possibility, Molly cried, "But I've raised them." Hours later, she was filing for custody, expressing concerns that Tracy and David could pose a threat to their safety. And at the end of the interview, the detective said that after talking to Molly and Thomas, he thought that this was going to just be a simple self-defense case. Now, some of Molly's recordings that she had made of Jason throughout the years were played to the court, although she stated she started doing this in 2015 after getting a divorce attorney's advice. She'd actually started this 2 years earlier, but she hadn't given all that to the police. The footage that was shown this time showed Jason moving a flower vase away from the table so they could have dinner. And suddenly Molly freaked out and started yelling and throwing plates of food all over the floor. She then stormed off, and the rest of the family could just be seen sitting there looking at each other. Now, there was around 150 hours of recording, but the defense allegedly only found 3 hours. It was also revealed that witnesses heard Molly telling people that she was the children's birth mother during a Bible study. And she was also saying that Jason's previous wife, Mags, was pen pals with her prior to her death and asked Molly to take care of the kids. Neither was true. A psychologist who came to examine Molly would tell the court that she was obsessed with taking Jack and Sarah from Jason. She had an unhealthy preoccupation with them and never had a genuine interest in building a life. Dr. Adams believed that she had this plan all along to take the children. She had even told him she had contacted a divorce lawyer before even marrying Jason to know how she could adopt the kids and eventually take them from Jason. However, then Jason's children, now 19-year-old Jack and 17-year-old Sarah, spoke to the judge as well. Jack said that Molly told him to lie and taught him how to manipulate. He said, "The first thing I want to state is that I was a liar. From age of 4 to 10 years of age, I was taught how to lie and manipulate people by Molly Martens. During this time, I was abused by Molly in every way you can imagine, and then some." He said his father was the most caring, funny gentleman, and he felt lost without him. He said, "I will never heal." He said he lost his trust in people and that this tragedy has destroyed him. He called Molly a monster and said the Martens family weaponized his and his sister's statements from 2015. Molly was sobbing loudly enough in the court to try to drown him out, and he just spoke louder. During Sarah's victim impact statement, she said, "I treasured a framed photo that my dad got me of him and my birth mom, Mags, on their wedding day." Molly threw it down the stairs. Molly Martens began her mind games when I was 5 years old. What kind of mother tells a 5-year-old that her father killed her birth mom? I was hoping there would be a retrial so my truth and my brother's truth could be heard. Instead, all we have is this. The charge they now accept is voluntary manslaughter. I've seen my father's bloody handprint on the door of his bedroom. There was nothing voluntary about his death. I know in my heart he tried to leave that bedroom. He didn't choose to leave us. He was taken from us. He was the victim. I said what I was instructed to say. Now those words have helped the Martens escape a murder charge and help Molly pretend she's the victim. I was used by her. Again, Molly tried to drown out her truth with her sobs, and Sarah just raised her voice as well. She told the judge that she would never get a father-daughter dance, he will never get to walk her down the aisle, that the Martens made her an orphan. She said that Molly beat Jack, and she had to pull Molly off of her brother countless times. She said she was proud to be Jason Corbett's daughter. The judge stated that nothing said in the victim impact statements had swayed his judgment, which was devastating for Sarah and Jack to hear. Tracy, Jason's sister and now the guardian of his children, told the judge not to let his children down. She asked for the maximum punishment. But Molly and Thomas Martens were sentenced to between 51 and 74 months or 4 to 6 years behind bars, but were only expected to serve 7 months because of good behavior and the 44 months they had already served. Their projected release was scheduled for June 2024. The judge stated that he didn't know the truth, but he used every experience in his life to make this fair and impartial. He said that the case had a lot of holes, but one thing that he knew for certain was that the children were blameless in this. But Sarah said she didn't understand why there was so much evidence that could have been presented but wasn't.
And this morning, the father and daughter responsible for killing an Irish businessman in 2015 walked out of prison.
Now, Sarah would open up more in her book that she wrote when she was 18 about what really happened inside the walls of that home as they were growing up. She said that she and Jack were not allowed to talk about their birth mother. Molly made their father sell the home that he had built with their birth mom as soon as they moved because Molly claimed she couldn't live in the shadow of their birth mother. She said as young as 5, her behavior and every thought was dictated by Molly. She wanted to do whatever Molly wanted and was watching every shift of expression and signs of her mood swings. Sarah remembered that Molly once saw a photo of Mags that Sarah forgot to hide, and Molly screamed, "This woman is dead. I am your mother," before throwing it down the stairs. Sarah was picking it back up. Her father asked what happened, but she never told him the truth. Around the same time, Sarah said that Molly would tell her that her dad suffocated her mom with a pillow, killing her. Sarah said it was always the kids and Molly versus dad. They were rarely able to talk to their father without being in earshot of Molly. And when she was 6, she actually saw blood on the toilet and on pads. She had no idea what a period was, so she asked Molly about this, and Molly said that Jason had raped and explained it as someone sticking a knife into a woman and cutting the inside. Molly would also often pit the siblings against each other and would allegedly begin to rage and beat Jack when Jason would leave for work. Everybody, including Jason, was walking on eggshells around her. A few nights before her dad's death, Sarah was listening to Jason and Molly fight as she often did at night, and she heard someone coming out of the room, so she ran back into her room pretending to be asleep. But suddenly Molly ripped off the covers saying, "He's going to kill me. He's going to kill me," like he killed his first wife. But this time, instead of just telling the kids, Jason had heard her say this, and Sarah saw her dad looking devastated. He told Sarah, "You know I did nothing to hurt your mom. I loved her very much." And Sarah believed that Molly had let her mask slip that night and revealed too much of her true nature, and that is when Jason also kind of gave up on the marriage as well. Sarah said that she knew now that Molly was a master of manipulation. She kept her close to her and apart from her father. She was never afraid of her father. In fact, she always was forced to side with Molly, but she would yell at her father in honor of Molly. And she was never afraid to do so because she wasn't afraid of her father. So that was something she wanted to make sure people knew. But Sarah spoke out about remembering the night before her dad was killed. Molly had given her tablets before she went to bed, telling her it was for a yeast infection. She jolted awake later that night, seeing the fairies on her bed sheets becoming a mass of spiders and lizards. And that's when she went to go get help from Molly. But at the door of her parents' bedroom, she noticed that her dad wasn't snoring like he always did. She said that normally she was allowed to go in and sleep with them, but then Molly turned her around and took her back to her bedroom. Sarah wrote that Jack also remembered Molly giving him 2 pills before he went to bed. Sarah said she woke up once more to hear Thomas and Molly talking quietly downstairs. They appeared angry, she couldn't hear them, and she fell back asleep. She wrote that the next morning after the death, when they first saw Molly again, Sarah alleged that the first thing that she said to them was, "I'm sorry, but I had to do it." Sarah noticed that Molly wasn't wearing the same pajamas that she had been wearing when she tucked Sarah back in after her nightmare. Hours later, Molly allegedly told the kids, "Your dad and I got into a fight and I pushed him and he hit his head and died." Sarah remembered Jack sobbing and she was just in shock. Days later, Sarah said that Molly told them to tell social workers that Daddy hurt Mommy and Daddy hit Mommy, to say that they really loved Mommy and didn't want to go with anybody else. The social workers would even state that Sarah used some of the same phrases as Molly did in her interviews. She was very cautious when discussing her mother and her father. Both Sarah and Jack also didn't say they witnessed the abuse of their mom, but that she told them she was abused. When Jack and Sarah were in her custody before they were arrested, Molly had already taken off her wedding ring, found a new home, and was planning a vacation. Sarah said it was like her dad never existed. And when Sarah said that she wanted her dad, Molly allegedly said, "He's dead. Get over it, Sarah." Sarah would write about a former fiance of Molly's who said that a few months before she moved to Ireland to help this family and become the nanny, she was on 16 prescription meds daily and another 10 as needed. She became pregnant at this time and suffered a miscarriage, and the fiance said that Molly's parents were exasperated by her mental illness and admitted her into a psychiatric unit after 5 months of this manic behavior. Weeks later, though, she was out of the unit and flying to Ireland to be with Jason and the kids. Weeks later. She was then obsessed with people believing that she was Sarah and Jack's biological mother, and she had even dyed their hair when they were 5 and 7 to give them blonde hair like hers. But Sarah and Jack now called Tracy and David their mom, and their dad and their sons, Dean and Adam, their brothers. They are a close-knit family, and they are determined to protect and support Sarah and Jack. Sarah said that she now knows what a loving mother is because she never got to meet her birth mother, and she also has another loving father because she already had one, but now she has a second one in David. Sarah said she still has panic attacks and when she hears or sees ambulances or sirens, and she planned to study criminal justice, but after the 2023 hearing, what she witnessed made her believe that the law is more focused on winning than seeking the truth or justice. So she focused on writing her book, and she's now studying English and drama.
I wrote this book because I wanted to humanize my experiences. I want other people to understand that this does happen. Also, I was overwhelmed by the injustice and unfairness, that my dad's truth was twisted and that his character was changed by the Martens and by the media. And I think it's really important that my dad is remembered for the person that he was. My dad was an amazing person. And like I said, his truth was twisted and our truths were twisted. And 3 days after my dad was killed, I lied because someone I loved told me to say something about someone else that I loved that wasn't the truth, and they called it the truth. A bit of redemption for me because I've tried in every way to take that back. But I want my dad to be remembered for the amazing dad that he was and the amazing husband that he was. My dad was definitely the fun dad. You know, he would be at the bottom of the stairs on the weekend saying booga wooga wooga, you know, and he would see how many steps I could go up and jump into his arms. You know, and I remember my dad's warmth. I remember my little hand, and I can only wrap it around one of his fingers, and walking on the beach in Spanish Point, you know. And my dad had a good character. You know, he taught me a lot of lessons in the short time that we had together. You know, he taught me not to judge anyone by the cover, you know, and he was present, he was happy, he was very loving and supportive. No matter what we were doing, he was always the loudest parent in the crowd cheering us on.
Sarah's spoken a lot about how Jack is just a lot more private and he deals with things in different ways, but there were little snippets in the book about how he felt or his experiences that she had gotten permission from him to talk about, and they are still very, very close as well. So what do you think? Was Jason killed in self-defense? Is there anything that rings true to that? And if they really did kill Jason and then completely try to crush who he was as a person as well and rip away any sense that he was a good man right in front of his children too. Had you heard anything about this case? I think it's crazy. Such a small part, but kind of a huge part, that Thomas was an FBI agent. He would know how to stage a crime scene. He would know how to get away with things. He would know what to tell his daughter to do. His daughter probably knew those things growing up as she was raised by him. But I want to know more about her mental health history in that psychiatric unit. I did read somewhere that she was diagnosed with bipolar at one point. Is there anything more? What was she saying in the psychiatric unit prior to going to Ireland? The fact that she was saying that she birthed those kids, that Mags had spoken to her via letters prior to her death and basically gave her approval to raise her children. Those are the things that really stand out to me, as this was someone who was very unstable. It was someone who wasn't afraid to tell a lie, a big lie at that. Again, I will link her book down below. Go and support, because there's so much more to this story than I could fit into this video. But don't forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.